Okay. Welcome to Jesus 911. My name is Jesse Romero. This is we're on a two-man car today. I think Dan is going to be on. He's supposed to be on with me. I want to talk to you about something that affects Catholics all the time. A lot of Catholics are always asking the question about yoga. Jess, what does the church teach about yoga? So that's what we want to get into today. Dan and me are going to go back and forth in this, and we're going to talk about the essential things that we as Catholics need to know about yoga. There's a good article. It's put out by the Greek Church, the Greek Orthodox Church of Greece. It's on yoga, and it says that Catholics are confused. Here's what it says. The Orthodox Church of Greece has prescribed yoga as absolutely incompatible. Did you get that? Incompatible with Christianity and not a kind of exercise, since yoga is a fundamental part of the religion of Hinduism. Now, here's something important. Here's my commentary. A lot of people will say, you'll find Catholic modernists that'll typically say, there's nothing wrong with yoga. You can do it. It's harmless. And you'll generally find Catholics that are Orthodox or people that are involved in healing, deliverance, and exorcism, where they've actually seen cases of people becoming diabolically afflicted from yoga. And so the article goes on to say, and Dan just joined us, so I'm going to want to get his commentary. Let me go through the article here. The Synodal Committee on Heresies under Archbishop Geronimos II of Athens and all Greece announced on Wednesday that yoga techniques, which had a variety of schools, disciplines, applications, and trends within Hinduism, has no place in the lives of Christians. So Archbishop Geronimos condemns yoga as syncretistic. It says, emphasizing the pastoral responsibility of the church to warn against religious syncretism. It was said the Holy Synod was compelled to discuss yoga after Greek media reports suggested that yoga techniques could help people deal with stress during the Wuhan epidemic. The Metropolitan Nectarios of Argolis of the Greek Orthodox Church, he said, yoga is not an exercise, but an act of worship. And he says, when we have repentance in church, whether it be a small confession or a big one, we don't do it for fitness reasons. We make a confession to God. Well, this is the same thing that people do during yoga, which is what we're trying to explain. So the Greek Orthodox Church issued a statement against the United Nations advocacy of yoga and the global body's 214 decision to designate June 21st as International Day of Yoga. It's funny, but the UN seems to be on wrong on all the issues this day. The UN writes, yoga is an ancient physical, mental, and spiritual practice that originated in India. The word yoga derives from Sanskrit and means to join or unite. There it is, symbolizing the union of body and consciousness. The UN states affirming the Hindu roots and the goal of yoga. Dan, welcome to the show. I'm looking at this article. It's called Greek Church Bans Yoga Catholics. I'm sure you've read the article. Give me your comments. Are the Orthodox going too far here? Or do you think that there's, as somebody who has seen people that are cases as a result of these Eastern practices, do you believe that the Orthodox are spot on their assessment of the dangers of yoga?
No, we've seen cases of diabolical affliction, and one of the vectors or intersecting defects or entry points is the continued use of yoga. And like the article says, it means yoked. The demon takes it very seriously. Yoga, as this Archbishop, I believe, had said, the Metropolitan Nectarios has said that this is an act of worship. Remember, in Christian and our Christian understanding of the human person, that we are a body-soul composite, and the phrase we get, it's kind of the foundation of Christian anthropology, is anima forma corporis, that the soul forms the body. And so so when the body now conforms to certain positions, these positions are active worships and invocations as much as our own bodily worship. Kneeling, genuflecting, making the sign of the cross. These are all acts of worship where the body bespeaks something of the inner person. So, so it's a breath of fresh air for me to see these Greek Orthodox come out and condemn it, because it's a very dangerous thing.
Dan, here's what a priest says in the article, and he's on the right side of the issue. He says, and it's Father James Manjackal. He's an Indian priest. He says this: yoga, as promoted among Catholics, is neither entirely a health discipline nor entirely a spiritual discipline, but sometimes one, sometimes the other, and often a mixture of both. Father Manjackal says, but in fact, yoga is primarily a spiritual discipline. And I know even priests and nuns in seminaries and novitiates who promote yoga as a help to meditation and prayer. He says, quote, it is sad that nowadays many Catholics are losing trust in great spiritualities and mysticisms for prayer and discipline handed over to them by the great saints like Ignatius of Loyola, Francis of Assisi, Francis de Sales, Teresa of Avila, and are now going after Eastern spiritualities and mysticisms coming from Hinduism and Buddhism, he lamented. And finally, I think here's the money verse from Father Manjackal. He says what you just said right now. He's repeating what you just said. He said, yoga means union. The goal of yoga is to unite one's transitory self, jiva, with the infinite Brahman, the Hindu concept of God. Yoga has its roots in the Hindu Upanishads, and in 8150, the yogi Patanjali explained the 8 ways that lead the yoga practices from ignorance to enlightenment. This, I guess, it's almost consistent with the Buddhist, the Eightfold Path. It's similar. He says they are, number 1, self-control, yama. Number 2, religious observance, niyama. Number 3, postures, asana. Number 4, breathing exercises, pranayama. 5, sense control, pratyahara. 6, concentration, harana. 7, deep contemplation, dhyana. And 8, enlightenment, samadhi. So Dan, this yogi himself is saying that the breathing exercises and the postures that a lot of Catholics find innocuous, he says no, this is part of the path to enlightenment. And when we're talking about enlightenment, we're not talking about Christian enlightenment, are we?
No, we're not talking about at Christian baptism when we hand a candle to the baptized, or they hold a candle over the baptized if it's an infant. We're talking about the true enlightenment. This is why, for example, in Christian baptism, one of the standard texts is the Gospel of John, and chapter 9, the healing of the blind man. True enlightenment is enlightenment of the soul, having the light of Christ within us. This is a mockery again. Everything diabolic is a mockery of what is good, holy, and true, what we find in the Catholic Church. So, to see a picture of a priest wearing a symbol of the Om, that Om is a mantra. What they pray is this mantra. And the goal, we have to understand the goal of yoga in this type of prayer. The goal is one goal besides enlightenment is annihilation into Brahma. And so therefore, for example, in Buddhism, the first principle of the Buddha is to avoid suffering. Life is suffering, so you transcend suffering by achieving enlightenment and altered states of consciousness, etc. This is their metaphysic, which is radically and drastically different from the Christian understanding of the death of self, dying to self so that Christ may rise with us, saying no to the darkness of sin and allowing Christ illuminate in and through us. And not only do we try to not be annihilated, but the loss of self, but to be truly oneself, illuminated by Christ. And not only do we try to not avoid suffering by transcending it, as Christians, we embrace the cross. If you did the second reading on today's Office of Readings, the Nations of Antioch, when I am offered up as a sacrificial victim, that the lions will be my tomb, then I will be the bread of God. And then I will truly be a man. Not only that I will be called a Christian, but to actually be one. You see the difference, to offer oneself in self-sacrifice versus this avoidance of suffering. At the very root, metaphysically, it's a radically different from Christianity, and there's no reconciliation. Whenever we give talks around the country and different things, this is always a hot topic because people are doing this and they're doing it. Well, Father says it's okay. Well, Father's wrong. I mean, some priests are being taught this in seminary. As you were reading, they were teaching this in seminaries. I understand because we all have priest friends, and sometimes they'll tell us little bursts of bad things that happen in our own seminaries in the U.S. Yeah. I think of G.K. Chesterton's quote: "We don't know what we're doing because we don't know what we're undoing." So before you reject Catholicism and Western spirituality, at least, that's why I was looking over here over my shoulder over my spirituality section. Grab Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Francis Xavier, de Sales, Ignatius Loyola. Steep yourself into Western prayer. Learn how to pray as a Western Roman Catholic. There is a deep and rich history here. There's no reason whatsoever that we should abandon it for Eastern prayer forms whatsoever. We have a rich tradition, the richest in the world. It makes saints. Don't reject it because you want to avoid suffering and you're trying to lower your stress level. You want to lower your stress level. Learn how to pray.
Dan, we're going to go to break. Jesus 911. We'll be right back. Rich, you tell me when we're back. Jesse Romero, we're back. Jesus 911, two-man car. Romero and Schneider. Dan, I want to ask you some questions about yoga. There's this understanding within yoga of this Kundalini snake. I'm looking at dictionary.com. It says Kundalini in yoga, it's the life force that resides at the base of the spine. It's the vital force lying dormant with one until activated by the practice of yoga, which leads one towards spiritual power and eventual salvation. I'm looking at a picture here on the internet of the Kundalini snake as depicted in yoga. It's supposedly along the spinal cord. There's a snake along the spinal cord that I'm looking here at another website called pininterest.com. It says the yogis call this opening up during yoga of the inner consciousness, the awakening of the Kundalini. The Kundalini is coiled up, that's snake language, coiled up energy in latent form or enslaved form. The cobra is a symbol of Kundalini power, cosmic energy, coiled and slumbering within man. It inspired seekers to overcome misdeeds and suffering by lifting the serpent power up the spine into God realization. Dan, any comments on that? I think you could say a mouthful about that. Have you ever seen this a session with a Kundalini snake or somebody who's been possessed as a result of yoga? I'm looking at this nun here, Dan. I think she may be a case. The picture of the nun.
Yeah.
What say you? Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I think just looking at the picture and reading the description should be sufficient for any sensible Catholic to realize that this is not of God. This is not for us. The idea of, again, mockery of Christ and the Church, God realization versus divinization or sanctification in the Catholic spirituality. The goal of the Christian spiritual life is divinization. We participate in divine life. This isn't God realization. This isn't an opening up of consciousness. If you want, before I go into the Kundalini, Louis de Montfort, Teresa of Avila, St. Alphonsus Liguori, John of the Cross, Edith Stein, saints and doctors of the church. Here's another one, just made a saint, Elizabeth of the Trinity. You want mysticism, follow the West. This stuff, Kundalini yoga in particular, is particularly nasty. It will manifest itself. We've seen it in many cases of possession, where once the priest enters the room, a heat like fire goes up and down the spine. If you look at it, the way it's designed, the way the body position invokes this particular spirit, which is a double coiled snake that's doing snake bites at the base of the neck, connecting what is the base of the skull, where cognitive ability translates into motor skills. And so this is where the transition from intellect to body takes place, and then it connects down to the generative principle, down into the womb. Often many of these are women doing this, and so women will do this to try to get pregnant, etc. You are invoking a very, very, very dark spirit when you're doing this, because and the body will remember this. We see this in cases of possession where the body, the demon now is laying claims to that and basically saying, this person has made this prayer posture and invoked my name bodily for X amount of years now. So I'm going to stay home because this is my home now. I've been invited in. So opening up of consciousness, God realization, if you read that and you look at the picture and you realize there is no way this is reconcilable. And again, all you got to do is see it on the other side when you're dealing with cases to realize, yeah, this is not nothing to be messed with. We have to get back to our tradition of Western prayer, learning how to pray, praying the rosary, meditative prayer, not avoiding suffering, but embracing the cross. This is the Christian way. This other stuff is a way of trying to lick the candy, and get the sweetness without having to really go into the faith. It's basically saying, I want God for me, for my own betterment, so I can have peace of mind. I haven't fully surrendered myself to Jesus Christ. And this is what people get into trouble big time. Everything that they described, picture that on a body, and it manifests itself in that way, in a snake-like way.
That's what I was going to ask you next. I want to ask you, the devil can imitate certain things. For example, I'm looking at this nun's picture, and I've seen people that are possessed, and you've seen them many more times than I have. Sometimes energumens, people that are possessed, when the demon manifests, they will start manifesting yoga-like positions, much like this nun. First question, I'm gonna ask you: have you seen that? And have you seen yoga-like positions during diabolical manifestations of energumens? That's the first question. Second question: I've also seen, which is pretty common, that in energumens, people that are possessed, they will also imitate speaking in tongues. And so my question to you, I'm asking you, is that we have to be very careful about these practices once again, and some people, because they're saying, well, doesn't it imitate just physical exercise, or doesn't it imitate the charismatic gifts? Tell us, is it true that the demon can imitate these postures in an energumen? Have you seen that?
Oh, over and over. Over and over again, we've seen it, particularly the snake-like posture.
That's a common one, isn't it?
Very common,
right? Yeah.
Very common. Hissing, speaking. You'll rethink your love of Harry Potter when you hear somebody and you hear somebody speaking true parcel tongue and telling you, "Leave me alone. You have no authority here." Telling a priest that. When you hear snake-like, when you hear the Harry Potter parcel tongue being spoken, and a human body being transformed into something hideous and animal-like at the control of a fallen angel, apostate angel, it'll kind of purify your certain view of the world. But so again, the anima forma corporis. This is the principle from St. Augustine. So we even see this in the diabolic. When we talk about the manifestation, what we mean is the demon at a higher level takes possession of the person and starts to manifest himself in the body, particularly when the person has begins a metanoia, conversion experience at the presence of the sacred, seeing a priest, moving towards liberation to prayer, seeking help from the church. The demon will come out and try to beat the soul back into submission, to not seek conversion and liberation. So we've seen that many times.
Dan, Father Gabriel Amorth, rest in peace, he's taken a beating by a lot of people in the Catholic left because he's been very strong on this position. In fact, the article quotes him. It says, in 2011, Italian exorcist Father Gabriel Amorth called yoga evil and satanic. He warned that seemingly harmless Oriental practices such as yoga are subtle and dangerous, he asserted. And then he says, you plan to do them for relaxation purposes, but they lead to Hinduism. All Eastern religions are based on the false belief of reincarnation. He's taken a beating for that by the Catholic left. What say you?
No, I mean, obviously, I would wholeheartedly agree with Father Gabriel. He's spot on. 50 years of experience in exorcism like he had. This is what he did. You get to know the enemy very well. So he was speaking the truth about the dangers of it. And I know that a lot of people that are very vocal against it in the Catholic Church are practitioners of it, and they find some spiritual satisfaction from it. But we can't emphasize enough that this is just a dangerous practice and it should be avoided. Seek the Catholic spirituality. It's safe. Here's another great one. It's constantly on my desk. True Devotion to Mary, another great book. Seek a Catholic Marian spirituality. These Eastern forms all lead to they open the soul to diabolic affliction, and that's what Father Gabriel is alluding to, and that's what he means by the word satanic. Truly think about the word satanic. Satanic is what Jesus referred to Peter, and what was the context of the first time we heard the word satanic? Get behind me, Satan, right? And what was the context of that? Jesus was telling the Son of Man must go suffer and die, and on the third day rise again. At the cross, Peter stepped in and says, "No, this is not the way it's going to be, Lord." So at the very mention of the cross, is when Peter stepped in, not understanding Christ's true messianic identity, and there Jesus calls him Satan. So what is the essence of the satanic? The inability to accept the cross. And so this is at its root is satanic by definition, according to Father Amorth, because it militates against Christian suffering in union with the suffering of Christ. It is ultimately the first principle of the Buddha: avoid suffering, transcend it. They call it transcendent, but it's avoidance, avoiding the cross. And Christians are called, if you wish to be my disciple, threefold conditions. All three conditions must be operant at all times. You must continually deny yourself. You must continually pick up your cross, and you must continually follow me. This is what it means to be a Christian. And so these things are what's being militated against. If you really want to break it down theologically and practically, what yoga militates against are those three things.
You're listening to Jesus 911, Jess Romero, Dan Schneider. We're talking about yoga, giving a very practical 2,000 years catechesis on yoga and why it's dangerous. We're going to be moving on to another topic. We're going to talk about a powerful letter written by Archbishop Carlo Viganò. He wrote the letter to President Trump, and he talks about the eternal struggle between good and evil that's playing out right now. And as we get into that article, I'm going to ask Dan to comment on, because I think paragraph 407 of the Catechism is being played out right now. The devil is attacking society. He uses education, politics, social action. Can anybody say Antifa or Black Lives Matter? And morals. We'll talk about that next. Jesus 911. Don't change that dial. Archbishop Viganò's letter. Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin's Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Healthcare news today seems to be coming from everywhere and everyone. It's confusing at least and untrustworthy at the worst. Dr. Aceta is a faithful Catholic in the Kern County community. He is trustworthy, well-researched, and will only give expert opinion on matters in his own specialty. Catholic teaching at its entirety is of utmost importance to Dr. Aceta. Give Dr. Aceta a call for your obstetrics and gynecological needs at 661-695-6617.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Soul Patrol, Jesus 911, two-man car. My name's Jess Romero, Dan Schneider. Dan, I take it that you read the Archbishop Viganò's letter. It was to President Trump. And he wrote the letter after President Trump was criticized by the Washington Archbishop. And I'm telling you, this letter that he wrote about the current crisis over the coronavirus pandemic and the George Floyd riots, he says, he told the president they're part of an eternal spiritual struggle between the forces of good and evil. And he's encouraging the president to continue fighting the good fight on behalf of the children of light. I got a dog in this fight because I got two young sons that are street cops that are working the PM shift, and they're right now in the midst of, their days off are canceled. They're out there with full riot gear since the George Floyd arrest every night. They're exhausted when they get home. They're working 10, 12-hour days. They come home, sleep 6, 7 hours, then go back out there, put on shields and face masks. And they're taking rocks and bottles. They're taking, and I told them, I told them I had a pep talk with them last night. They said, Dad, man, I'm tired. My body's exhausted. I said, you know what you are? You're part of the children of the light. You're part of Team Jesus. I said, when history looks down upon you, because this will pass like everything else is going to pass, God is smiling upon you right now because it's you two out there, I said, that are holding back the forces of darkness from turning our society into the purge. You want to know what the purge is? Just watch that movie, The Purge. That's exactly what we have with Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They want the purge, and there's powerful forces that are financing this. But going back to the letter, Dan, what jumps out at you? I mean, aren't you impressed with the moral clarity of Archbishop Viganò? He writes like a prophet. What say you about the letter? I'm sure you read it. It's very short.
Yeah, he's spot on. He knows this country. He was, apostolic nuncio means he's basically the ambassador appointed by Pope Benedict. He is one who has been really prophetic in his calling out the works of darkness within our own house. It's going to have to be cardinals and archbishops and bishops and priests to clean their house, just as you and I have to help clean our own houses and work with lay people and little by little encourage our hierarchy towards, cleaning up our seminaries, etc. But what he speaks is very, very clear. I think the thing that really struck out is what's not mentioned in the article and ties into the article is how Bishop Viganò has been having to go into hiding, which is very interesting. That a priest, an archbishop of the living God, has to go into hiding from whom, from what? It's just a very interesting phenomenon. And also, what he mentions is, just as there is a deep state, there is a deep church. And so, what he alludes to is corruption in the church. He uses the word Masonic. This used to be stuff of kooky, conspiracy theorists, right-winger weirdos. And now we're starting to hear this from mainstream bishops, cardinals, archbishops. You've got Bishop Strickland, who's not afraid to speak the truth. You've got Archbishop Schneider, and Archbishop Viganò. You've got
Burke.
Some good. What's that?
You had Cardinal Burke.
Oh, Cardinal Burke, that are not afraid
the retired bishop from Corpus Christi, Texas, Bishop Griseda. Yeah, no, they're coming out, Dan.
And these are not crackpots, you know what I mean? That are out broadcasting on shortwave radio from their basement, wearing tinfoil on their heads. These are archbishops and cardinals and bishops of the living God. These are educated men. These are not. Again, this isn't some weirdo out there with tinfoil on their head saying, "Hey, man, the sky is falling." These are educated men that seen what's going on in the corruption inside the church. And so we need to be, as laymen, to just support them, get behind our priests and keep supporting them, because I'm not saying it's the final battle, because the day and the hour belongs to the Father alone. But this is a big battle. What's going on right now? The battle, not the battle for religious freedom, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, being told how we can worship by the state, when we can worship, how many people can come together and worship, how we can receive communion is now being dictated by the state. It's a very interesting phenomenon. And in some states, you've got the state opening up churches, but the bishops are remaining closed. We're living in really interesting times. And I think the second point to take away is he calls us to prayer. The other side understands this, because what's happened since Trump was elected, the witches immediately, the witches of this country started forming and meeting again, think of the liturgical aspect of this, on the full moon at the equinox, as it comes around, every lunar cycle, right? What do we call her? We call her, right, the moon beneath her feet. She reflects the light of the sun. This is the medieval understanding of the Virgin Mary. They're now at the lunar cycles cursing the witches of this country. They're coming out. There is no more hiding. They're coming out and they're uniting and cursing our president. The least we can do as Catholics is to pray for him. He points out that he's probably the most pro-Christian, pro-family, pro-life president we've had since Roe v. Wade. And I think that's absolutely true. But how many Catholics curse him? I'm not saying you're going to put on your witch's hat and you're going to get out your cauldron and you're going to do spells. But how many Catholics right now saying, I hate that guy. That guy's evil. That guy is this. That guy is that. That's a curse. We may not think that in those terms. The demon looks for the mouth that blesses and curses. If you want to be effective in spiritual warfare, this is what we teach at Liber Christo. If you want to be effective, you must have purity of thought, word, and deed. And there's inconsistencies when we speak one thing. We're going to proclaim Christ. We're going to receive Christ in the Eucharist, and we go into the parking lot and we commit absolute manslaughter against our neighbor or against the priest because he didn't. Oh, his homily was terrible. I can't believe they wore that at church. We have to watch our speech and resist the temptation to curse the political officials. Instead, pray for them. Pray for them. That was the last takeaway for me on the article, was the need to pray for our church, pray for our government officials, make sacrifices. Case after case, we'll tell people when they're suffering, going back to the first segment, offer your suffering up for the purification of the church. Offer it up that Our Lady will take the church of her Son, entrusted to her, right? Born from the side of Christ, she's icon of the maternal church. She's an image of the church, virgin bride, fruitful mother. Going to her and praying for her intercession is very, very critical right now. Instead of falling into despair and worldliness, or just saying, forget it, I'm not even going to bother. We have to stand and fight. And how do we stand and fight? On our knees in prayer.
Dan, I'll tell you what I like about this article. Well, there's two things that jump out at me. Akita, Japan, 1973. Our Lady of Akita, Japan, warned us that you'll have bishop fighting against bishop. Yeah. Because you have the Bishop of Washington who criticized President Trump. And in fact, he not only criticized him, but Archbishop Gregory Wilton has ordered his priest to protest against President Trump. I'm looking at an article here. Archbishop Wilton Gregory is ordering his clergy to dress in cassocks, or at least blacks, and protest today, Monday, at 11 a.m., Monday morning at Lafayette Park, and then march to the White House at noon and protest. So the Archbishop is he's ordering his priests to go protest the president. Now, here's what's interesting to me. Is that I'm reading an article that was posted by Church Militant. It says Bishop Gregory's trying to pull a fast one. It says, in addition to an obvious violation of civil rights, an employer cannot order employees to participate in a political protest. The rally is also timed to coincide with other protests where leaders will be boisterously demanding that Trump be deposed. This is sad to me because Archbishop Gregory is trying to orchestrate this protest with Catholic priests to stand up alongside Antifa and Black Lives Matter against the president. I don't know about you, but this is orchestrated evil, and this pains me as a Catholic that Archbishop Gregory Wilton would organize a protest like this, which once again, the article says, an employer can't force you to engage in a political protest. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think again it misses the whole point, and that is our response as Christians needs to be prayer. Early, I think it was Saint Hippolytus, in second century, late second century, or third, late third century, said that Christians are like leaven into the world. We're leaven, we're yeast that we're quiet, we're silent, but we bring out and the rising. We help raise society to our higher angels, to our highest nature, seeking the common good, etc. Radical Catholicism is living liturgically, living prayerfully, and not. You want to stand on a street corner and protest? Bring your rosary, right? Protest the evil of abortion. Bring your rosary and pray. This is the way we have to speak. And again, you and I have talked about this before. This inversion of the laity and the priesthood. We see now. I was at Mass not long ago, and they said we need volunteers we need to get active participation of our parishioners, and so and so is going to hold up signs of what we need. Right? It wasn't the Gabriel Project. It wasn't teaching, catechesis. It wasn't soup kitchen. It was Eucharistic minister. It was choir. It was all these things that were liturgically based, bringing communion to the sick. We've got a deacon, but why doesn't the deacon do that? We got lay people doing that. So we have to remember back on Catholic principles. The charism of the laity is secular in nature. The charism of the priesthood is oriented towards sacrifice and towards the sacraments. And so we keep again and again getting that mixed up, where laity are now getting overly active liturgically, and now we've got priests doing political protest, which to me is an inversion of what we are as Catholics.
Good point, Jesus 911. Dan and Jess Romero. We'll be right back talking about the inversion of reality in our society and even in the church.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tyr and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
Coming up on the next Empowered by the Spirit with Deacon Steve Greco.
This show is one of the most important shows that we've done because it's a focus on the current pandemic, COVID-19. Bishop David is filled with the Holy Spirit, someone who is right in tune with what we need to do to grow spiritually. And I'm so excited to put it on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. This is a show that will give us encouragement and will give us hope.
Catch Empowered by the Spirit Fridays after the Terry and Jesse Show on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 526-2151.
Soul Patrol two-man car, Romero and Schneider. We're talking about this Archbishop Vigano's letter. Dan, I want you to flesh two things out. Archbishop Viganò he makes a reference to the Masons twice. Is the Masons, are they Luciferian, diabolical? Because he says this to President Trump. He says, it will not be surprising if in a few months we learn once again that hidden behind these acts of vandalism and violence, there are those who hope to profit from the dissolution of the social order so as to build a world without freedom. And then he says, solve et coagula, which is a maxim, or it's a motto, which means dissolve and coagulate, or it also means, that something must be broken down before it can be built up again. Then Archbishop Viganò says, as the Masonic adage teaches. So he let President Trump know, I think this is Masonic underpinnings. Then a second time he says, they are subservient to the deep state, to globalism, to align thought to the New World Order, which they invoke ever more frequently in the name of a universal brotherhood, which has nothing Christian about it, but which evokes the Masonic ideals of those who want to dominate the world by driving out God out of the courts, schools, out of families, and perhaps even out of churches. Is Masonic harmless, or is there something of the diabolical within it?
The church has for the last, since the institution of Freemasonry in the 1700s, the church has responded immediately and unequivocally since then that association with the Freemasons is completely incompatible with Christianity, that you cannot be a Freemason and a Catholic in good standing. This has been very clear on this. In fact, I've even got an article from a Freemason that examined it and made that conclusion as well from looking at papal. And it was a very well written article. Two things. One is this universal brotherhood, or you hear this language, universal brotherhood, solidarity. This is part of the language of the global type movement. It sounds at one level, of course, we are our brother's keeper. We need to have a universality in our charitable works to help the poor, etc. But this universal, what they're speaking about is not what that is. Our understanding as our commonality as human persons, as made in the image and likeness of God and the divine dignity of everyone, respecting others, etc. These are all great principles that we believe as Catholics. What they're talking about is an undermining of the very essence of katholikos, which is the Greek word for universal. The universal church and our unity comes through our common faith and common practice, our common beliefs. This is where man is meant to be united. Without Christ and without the church, then any other unity is really destined to fall into what the ultimate goal of Antifa is, and that is anarchy, a total disruption and breakdown. Because again, another saying or belief of the Freemasons are against cross and crown. What does that mean? Shedding off all things having to do with the church, the crown. And in fact, there's at one level, I forget which degree it's at. There's 3 levels of Freemasonry, but 33 degrees of progression. At the 33rd level, 33rd degree, it's revealed that the architect of the universe is Lucifer. And also, I think the 17th level degree, at a higher level, there is a ceremony where you trample upon a crown that's symbolic of the papal tiara, an absolute rejection of anything Catholic. So what you have is an anti-church being created at the low levels. They're guys, they're good guys are looking. It's a supplement or a replacement of Christian fellowship and brotherhood. So yeah, they're doing fundraising, they're doing good social works. But as someone progresses through, it gets more and more revealed and a little darker and darker as it goes. And so yeah, he alludes to this, and you're hearing more of this coming out again from really. This is an archbishop. This isn't some crackpot with tinfoil on his head sitting in his basement somewhere in Missouri. Not that there's anything wrong with Missouri, but somewhere in the Midwest, just going against, broadcasting to 3 people that are listening. If you notice, what really opened my eyes as well is Freemasonry in parts of this country are there's a very, very thin line between Freemasonry and the KKK movement. But there's also Freemasonry called Prince Hall Freemasonry that is the same thing with the Black Panthers. But also, the movement in Mexico, the Cristero movement, was fighting against the persecution of the church 100 years ago. This was instigated by Freemasons. If you weren't a Freemason, you didn't get a job in Mexico. The history of Freemasonry around the world it militates directly against the church wherever it's at. So to the point where in Mexico 100 years ago, it was illegal to say mass. Going to those martyrs, Father Miguel Pro, and some of the saints and martyrs from Mexico, those are good saints for us to invoke on this day because we're starting to see this assertion of against Christian against Christian beliefs, not just Christian beliefs, but now telling us when we can worship, how many can gather at one time, if we can sing or not sing. I have to admit, as a half joking aside, the non-singing for most Catholics is not a bad thing because we're not the best singers anyway. But
unless it's sacred music, we can belt out the sacred music in those monasteries, but contemporary stuff, we're not too good at contemporary music, Dan.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you another question. I think that paragraph CCC 407 of the Catechism is being lived out, has been lived out in the last couple of decades since the 60s up until the present moment. We're seeing it right now. Especially, let me just read it, then I want you to flesh it out. The doctrine of original sin, closely connected with that of the redemption of Christ, provides lucid discernment of man's situation and activity in the world. By our first parent sin, the devil has acquired a certain domination over man. Even though man remains free, original sin entails captivity under the power of him who thenceforth has the power of death, that is the devil. Ignorance of the fact that man has a wounded nature, inclined to evil, which is the definition of concupiscence, gives rise to serious errors in the areas of 1, education, 2, politics, 3, social action. That's what we're seeing right now in the streets. And 4, morals. Dan, is this a prophetic statement of the Catechism or what?
I absolutely think so. We see again what the Catechism is stating is that the impact of concupiscence, original sin, doesn't just think of original sin not necessarily as an infection but a deprivation. So man is deprived of something. It isn't that he has been infected with an evil, inasmuch as a perfection that we were made for has now been deprived, and so what remains is concupiscence and a desire towards sin. So we see that effect on our bodies and on the individual body, but also on the body politic, on the social body. We see similar, just as we have inclination towards personal sin, society as a group cultures, governments can also fall into the same thing. And so he's education, politics, social action, and morals. We see this. We see this very clearly. That we fall into our lower natures, and laws are being enacted accordingly. And then now what we have now is just chaos. It's mayhem and on the streets across the country. What's interesting is the next paragraph too, I think, is somewhat prophetic. It quotes John Paul as well, or alludes to John Paul, footnotes him. The expression can also, the consequence of original sin and the sin of the world, quoting St. John, can also refer to the negative influence exerted on people by communal situations and social structures. We have to be aware of that. This negative influence upon us, we have to push back prayerfully, but we have to push back against the rights and freedoms that have been taken away. Within reason, etc. But we see two dynamics, and this is the effect of the fall on our society, and we're seeing it being played out. And behind this, as it's starting to come out, behind the Antifa movement and some of this dark stuff are there's anarchists out there that are funding this. I mean, I've just seen it in social action. They pay people. A lot of people that are showing up in these places are being paid, they're being bussed in, etc. This is the way the left, they stage it. And they make it look like this natural uprising and demanding. But at the end of the day, this is very much staged. This is very much not just politically motivated, but also staged and funded by outside forces against our communities. And God bless all of our law enforcement and first responders out there, because they really need our prayers right now.
Yeah, they sure do. Dan, yeah, there's a video by Project Veritas. This what's his name? O'Keefe. He did an undercover investigation on Antifa, and he exposed they have an Antifa member who just basically dropped out, and he's in a black mask, so you can't see his face and identity. And they just interviewed him. He said everything that you just said right now. Very organized, very well funded, and it's a paramilitary anarchist organization here in the United States and in the West. Hey, Dan, good stuff here today. Jesus 911 talked about yoga. You know what? The information that Dan is putting out, that we put on this show here, Dan and Kyle, this is second to none. If you like what you heard, okay, just like us and send this to people in your social media. How many people do you know that are into yoga, believe in Freemasonry and all this stuff? You know, share this show, hit the subscribe button, and share the show with others. Dan, good stuff. You got a 30-second words for the warrior out there. Should we be praying our rosary every day? What else should we be doing?
You should be praying your rosary every day. You should be invoking the help of Saint Joseph, Saint Michael, right? Saint Michael. Invoke the angels. The litany of Saint Michael. Look it up on EWTN webpage. One of the things I would recommend as well, another book. I threw a lot of books out there. This is one on approved Marian apparitions. Those who saw her, the Akita Japan that you alluded to earlier is in there. Approved apparitions. Get to know the heart of Our Lady. She has been speaking to her children for a century, for 100 years now, asking us to pray, prayer, fasting, make sacrifices, and to reestablish and help bring the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, which is a return to a Eucharistic-centered spirituality where Christ Eucharistic is once again the center of Christian faith. And one last thing that comes to mind, it's been in my mind for quite a while now since this all started, and that is the words of Joshua. This is for all the husbands and wives out there.
Hear the music. Hurry up.
Yeah. You have to hear it. As for me and my household, I will serve the Lord. We got to stand and serve the Lord and start taking care of our domestic business.
Amen. We're out of service. 10-7. We're out. See you next time. Jesus 911. Up next, Gary Machuda. Stand by. Don't change that dial. Good stuff.
Saint Faustina's Prayer for Priests. O my Jesus, I beg thee on behalf of the whole Church, grant it love and the light of thy Spirit, and give power to the words of priests, so that hardened hearts might be brought to repentance and return to thee, O Lord. Lord, give us holy priests. Thou thyself maintain them in holiness. O divine and great High Priest, may the power of thy mercy accompany them everywhere, and protect them from the devil's traps and snares, which are continually being set for the souls of priests. May the power of thy mercy, O Lord, shatter and bring to naught all that might tarnish the sanctity of priests. For thou canst do all things. Amen. Virgin most powerful, pray for us.